All right. So, ma'am, to start with, would you please tell us a bit about your journey so far with Impulse?
Well, I started very early at 17 when I was just at high school. And that was the first step to, I think, taking forward being a change maker, I would say. I was very active with the leadership training services in my school called St. Joseph School, in the quest of forming an alumni after high school. The group of friends that came together in this journey led to the foundation of what Impulse NGO Network is. And today it's like 31 years in existence. It's operating still from Shillong in Meghalaya, the states among the 8 northeast states of India. But we have grown in size in terms of our expansion. We have scaled out to 8 states of the Northeast, North Bengal, and we've also scaled out to Myanmar, Nepal, and Bangladesh. So I think the journey has been quite, long, but then I think it just seemed like yesterday.
Right. Okay. And ma'am, a bit about your work model. Like I read about it, and I read about 6 Ps in 6 hours, which is very well established. But would you please tell us a bit about how you find these kids and how you get the leads and on those lines of it?
So as we are working with the organization, earlier vision is to provide economic livelihood opportunities where we in fact initiated a small village called Sinten in the East Khasi Hill district of Meghalaya. And that happened to be a village adjacent from where my grandmother comes from. Now, the focus at that point of time, 31 years ago, was that if we strengthen economic sustenance and resilience market, then the mothers would be able to send the children to school and the family would have better economic and children will not have to go to work. So that is where we started off. And why this village is because it was very rich with craft, especially bamboo and cane. And that is when we took it up because of the learning lesson that I had as a young person out of school, out of high school, to see a lot of children on the street, a lot of children working as child labor. That in fact was very, disturbing for me. So I was very uncomfortable with the situation around me and the fact that I was always questioning that access to justice is a right for everybody. So that was where the work got started. And way back in 89-90, when the entire Supreme Court order came about in protection of the environment, where it was taken forward that if you have to protect the environment, it was so critical and very important that the forest has to be protected. So that is when the Supreme Court ban on timber affected a lot of indigenous population in the northeast of India, since there was no roadmap on what they should do, but rather, it was affecting even artisans who are working with bamboo and cane. So as we journeyed to get their rights in terms of that agriculture product of bamboo and cane is not going to disrupt the forest at all. In fact, it is an economic livelihood. So in the process of that, we started experiencing missing children, children migrating, families sending the kids to work as domestic help and, going out. That led us with a big question mark, what's happening, what's going on around us. Till then, I never really understood the issue of human trafficking, So when I look back, that is when I didn't really understand. I understood that economic livelihood is pushing people into to send the children to work because there's not enough sustenance in the house. And when we trying to map the situation and understood that the missing children were not in contact with the family and they've gone missing, we were in fact getting a lot of the system, that the government, to really discuss about the issue. We had a lot of discussion with them and how this has to be intervened. I was invited by an organization that had a network called ADSEC in Kolkata that actually brought about South Asia organization, that are part of Action Against Trafficking and Sexual Exploitation. In fact, Mr. Manobendra Mandal, who is, in fact, a mentor, who in fact got me to work into anti-trafficking, I should say, thanks to him for getting me in that consultation way back, in the 90s, that I started opening my eyes, learning from various organizations who are senior most at that point of time and who still continuing to work in South Asia about how human trafficking takes place, how slavery takes place. So my turn came, in fact, that I was supposed to share the issues of the state that I come from and the neighboring states that I was actually starting to work to understand. And we were still a group of young people, so you have a lot of enthusiasm, you have a lot of wanting to change the issue right now, wanting to have justice right now. And with that enthusiasm, I was connected to a lot of organization in that platform who came up to me and had discussion about why human trafficking takes place, and the situation that we are facing could be, an opening eye to us that this is taking place and people are getting trafficked. So I came back with a lot of learning. I came back with a lot of information. I came back with no, solution, but I came back with that we had to do something. So that step of we have to do something and we have to get it done, and no human being should be enslaved. I spoke to my group of friends. So Rosanna is also my college friend who's still part of the founding board. We discussed with our group of friends that we have to intervene. So the intervention was very simple. I started my work when internet was not really there. Internet was just coming to India. We would not be sitting in the house and talking to people, as I'm doing right now, but it was going to a cyber cafe and taking a floppy disk of what you have typed in your PC, and you're trying to send these emails. And I started sending these emails to almost 80 plus organizations that I met in that entire forum, AdSec regional forum of South Asia. And it was very simple for me. It's like, introducing everybody. Do you remember who I am, from where I come from, the problems of the region in the Northeast, the missing children? And if you find anybody from the Northeast of India, please get in touch. So I think at that moment for me is like, we have to do something, but we didn't have a solution right there. And we got the first reply out of the 80 from Prerna, Preeti and Praveen Patkar, the organization in Mumbai, who's very senior to the work that they've been doing in this field, telling me that we have kids, young girls from Meghalaya who has been rescued from Kamatipura, the red light area. And I think at that point of time for us is unveiling the next step. And the next step was, how do we go about it? So the learning lessons for me from the day one was that the legal framework is so critical. So when we talk about access to justice, we have to apply the legal framework that we have access to, and we need to actually make it workable. And in the process of that, we took the step of finding the families of the girl. And in the meantime, we were intimated that there was another girl from Tripura who was already rescued, and we need to do something. So the journey in assessing what we call family study of these girls, the steps that we took, and subsequently in the more and more cases that we received, led to the birth of the 12 pillars, which is the 6 P's and 6 R, but they were not born overnight. So this innovation evolved in the last 25 years. By the 15th year, the mission of the innovation led that what are the steps that needs to be intervened, learning from case to case. So the documentation of case to case referred to us of the girls and boys and all other gender that was referred to us over the years led us to bring forward the 6 pillars, which is called the 6 P's, and the 6 R's, which is actually report, rescue, rehabilitation, repatriation, reintegration, and restitution. So it was a journey of collective leadership. It was a journey that we had to vision together, and we have to have a single window platform. And that is where Impulse Model was born. And that's how we've been applying this innovation, which became the heart and soul of the organization, that scale out to all our partners in the Northeast, North Bengal, our networking partners in many destination points in India. And in 2012, we got the World Innovation Prize from the Global Development Network and the Japanese Most Innovative Development Project that led us to scale out to Myanmar, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And one learning lesson that no single organization can work alone. Innovation is a method, a methodology that avoids any kind of duplication, that allow the legal lens in a full circle in the way we intervene human trafficking.
Right. Okay. And ma'am, other like you told that unemployment is a major reason that these children are migrating from the place. So other than unemployment, are there several underlying reasons which are leading to human trafficking?
So the changing trends of human trafficking over the last 31 years and in the last 25 years of the model, impulse model, taking intervention, with a collective response, led us to understand that the trend is changing drastically in the last 6-7 years. But when it started off, it was more of people migrating for work from the region, and it was rural to urban, and that's led them to be exploited in red light area. Gradually, it was children being trafficked from across the border for labor forces of the work in the rat hole mining in Meghalaya, which we intervened and started to understand the level of, how children are being trafficked for labor. And in the course of time, it was also educated young girls getting trafficked for, greener pastures and working outside the Northeast looking for jobs. And that was the other aspect of it. And the third is that in the learning lesson, we started seeing complex trends of human trafficking, where the online spaces, the cyber spaces, has led to more vulnerability of young people, even young people who are using the social media, young people who are using online tool dating apps that actually led to being trafficked to different levels. And the fact that how the trafficking scenario in India, which I think is the news that everybody reads every day, and it's something that people are unveiling, the kind of how big this business is. It's a 30 billion industry. It'll continue to take different shape in terms of how vulnerable people could be at any spaces. And it is time that we look at slavery, not just that being home is being safe, it can just being home, you're unsafe. Because the fact that you're well connected, but you could be vulnerable to the other spaces, these are all facts based on the cases we are dealing.
And among the 8 northeastern states, are there particular states which have more number of trafficking cases?
Over the years, when we started, there was a denial. In the course of time, the state understood that it could be anybody being trafficked. It's not people coming from outside being trafficked. But when we talk about data and statistics, till today, I think the only data that India brings into the limelight or visible to all the audiences is always the NCRB, the data that come from all the police. But having said that, the data that is being registered are cases of people who are trafficked are always very less in terms of numbers, because they are often not registered at the source. It's always registered at the destination where the rescue takes place. So having said that, if we go by data, it's so difficult to really look at the gravity of the problem, because every organization have their own data in the country based on the cases that are being dealt by each one of them. Police has their own data. Some are, overlapping data because, but what we have tried to do is that from 2012 onwards, looking at this kind of gravity of data, we came about in evolving a technology platform called Impulse Case Management Center, which is actually the offshoot of a solution that connect anti-human trafficking unit in the Northeast, service providers of organization across this country who are part of the process of the Impulse model, and also the state partners of Impulse NGO network in the 8 states of the Northeast, where we decided that data, whether at source, transit, or destination, need to be registered to give an understanding of which states, is high in terms of number, and also connect it to the law enforcement. So from that point of a data, Assam always stood it high because being a bigger state, but that doesn't mean that other states do not have problems of human trafficking. And now when you look at the fact that Southeast Asia, is also another trend where people started moving, leave aside the fact that COVID-19 has led to a different kind of vulnerability. online exploitation, pornographic site. People are getting vulnerable and duped into the situation. So that is the data that we take as entry data. But when we are talking about data at a policy level, we bring that data in perspective, but we bring the UN data, which actually makes it much more, solidified in terms of, a comprehensive way of how we discuss. But we cannot look at human trafficking only from the lens of data. That's my point of view.
Right. Yeah. Ma'am, like you've also been rolling a lot of awareness programs and training programs, like sensitizing journalists on how to cover these events. So who are the ones who are giving these trainings, and how do you manage to, like, a bit about the training programs?
So the Impulse model, the 12 pillars, the 6 Ps, which is partnership, prevention, protection, policing, press, and prosecution. These Ps has different division, as I call them, the labs, that has evolved of bringing together both the private and public partnership in the course of the learning lessons of the cases, and also the sensitivity that has to be created across the stakeholders so that there is an understanding of what is human trafficking, or when do we consider it's human trafficking. The whole big debate today about, prostitution and trafficking, the whole big debate about, whether it should children below 18 is understood, but when you are above 18, how do you determine it's a trafficking cases? So we have worked towards providing training for the law enforcement under the policing. We collaborate with the police training school in every state of the Northeast. And in the course of time, we have become more of a technical organization. Our state partner has become more of the, specialized people to provide training. Like, for example, we have state partners who are lawyers, like Tashi, Barfungpa, Rapton in Sikkim, and Sunil Mao in, in Arunachal Pradesh, who become regular trainer, Miguel Kuya in Guwahati, that it does a lot more training as partners in child protection. So we've also created this collective leaders with skill sets that can go forward and provide these kind of training to the stakeholder, like the police, and also the other, departments and, ministries as well, so that we are able to reach out with new knowledge and trainings. The other factor is we have created a lot of tools and manuals and training, and we are evolving with a lot of online tools right now, for the fact that as the world is changing, the tool we created 25 years ago and 15 years ago in having a manual, it might not be so conducive right now. So we are evolving to create more, easier tool, easier communication, so that the training becomes relevant to the present time. That's what we do. We use a lot of films. We use a lot of different infographics that we are, in fact, working towards developing to make things much more easier, so that there are more new forms of training to address the issue. As far as the press lab is concerned, we have the Impulse model press lab, which is part of the press. It evolved when we started working with journalists across the Northeast, across the 3 countries that we are operating, that there needs to be sensitivity in the way you report human trafficking. The fact that it cannot be a one-time off report of only rescue and, these quite news that are become so open to everybody, but then there's no follow-up into it. So that evolved from the learning lesson of many work with the media and training that we had designed to work with the media, and having a lot of media, advisors that work together with us. The birth of Impulse Model Press Lab came where it's headed by Mr. Karma Palzor, who is also the co-founder of Advi Entertainment, East Mojo. So he's known mostly for East Mojo, but he was a former CNN, news journalist, correspondent, news reader, who had so much of experience in his hand. And we have journalists as core committee in India, Nepal, and Myanmar that came together, that believe in this vision, that they need to provide fellowship to journalists so that journalists can do more in-depth reporting. So the birth of the fellowship for journalists, which is a 1 year and a 4 weeks fellowship, evolved from the partnership and collaboration with like-minded journalists that has been reporting on our work for many, many years. that came together to understand the lens that we are trying to focus on: sensitive reporting, in-depth reporting, understanding that reports can also bring in policy dialogue. And that's how the Press Lab was born. It was born through a journey, you know. So I think every P has its journey. And now we also have the impulse model: prevention, co-creation, that in fact was born during the COVID situation, in the fact that after 13 years of impulse social enterprise, looking at unsafe migration to economic livelihood opportunity and resilience market, we see the co-creation evolving with, Rural Futures, which is in fact an innovation by Saurabh Malhotra, that evolved, that we need to co-create, a comprehensive end-to-end value chain that brings the forests of the indigenous population, that brings the value of the weaves that the artisans are weaving, that brings in the value that food security as an important element of prevention of human trafficking. So it has a more of a coexistence of supporting each other. So this is how the impulse model grows. It's just not stagnant. So what I'm trying to say here is that the model has been tested, replicated, and it has reached new heights, but it has also grown with different divisions, with new leaders coming on board to see the reason of co-creating, to see the reason of labs, to keep the passion of people are also in one space. So that is where the impulse model is, in terms of expanding, work with journalists and others.
And then what are a few ground level impact that you've seen? Are more cases being reported after you established yourself, or what are the other changes that you're seeing on the ground level in the research?
So I think I should take back myself, at the age of 17, standing up and talking about the issue of human trafficking. And after 31 years of the organization, when everybody is talking about human trafficking. So there's drastically a new, I would say it has evolved, it has been accepted, and the denial is no longer there. The system are trying to work to address this issue in a more collaborative way. The Northeast, I think the birth of the impulse model, I give credits to the system like the law enforcement that work very closely with us, the state partners in the region that, believe in this vision. So it has evolved where more cases are being reported, it's more discussed, it's much more in the open, it is not a denial stage. So it's not like it's your problem and not mine, so it's more, but now the changing trends is that the challenge of the online issue is a trend which is going to take some time for even law enforcement to understand how it happened and what other ways and means it has to be reported. Because if things start happening on all the apps, which are equally created for business purposes, but they're again used by traffickers to traffic people. So then, trafficking doesn't end with what we have learned and have solved, but it is growing with new trends. And you have to also come with new learnings and new technology support, to address that kind of human trafficking issues as well.
Ma'am, could you share a few instances of online trafficking and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so we started 7 years ago when cases of girls being, forced into, what we call it, talking, in the webcam, caught with situation where they've been blackmailed. The fact that we also have to see that when we talk about artificial intelligence, how trafficker today would hire psychologists, would hire people at the back end who understand artificial intelligence and who will also understand that if people are gearing up, it's just like what you post, so what we learn is that people sometimes use social media to exhibit their happiness and sadness and interest and everything, right? Where sometimes we throw ourselves out in the open and become vulnerable, right? And then through that, when we feel lonely, and mental health is such an issue today in our country and globally, that when we get information in our messenger or we get people contacting us who happens to understand us so well because they have already studied,
Right.
our likes and dislikes, our temperaments, our or the words that we use in our social media, the kind of posts that we use, the kind of pictures that we use, have not being able to understand that somebody is watching us all the time, right? And we get trapped into that communication. And that's where I would use this case that we receive, and we call it mama counselor, where a girl, and we have many cases like that, where she became very insecure about her looks, you know, her body weight and how she looks. And she was insecure in terms of her self-esteem. She was insecure with a group of friends. She was so much navigating the fact about losing weight and being able to be looking perfect like everyone else out there. And there's another similar one who was so skinny, and she felt that, oh, she was too skinny and she doesn't have the build that she require, was actually contacted by these mama counselor. We use the word mama counselor because we don't know who is there in the back end. It could be a male, female, or any other gender talking to these girls who came in as friends, who came in, like I just said, you know, they have been understanding your whole trend and trying to talk to you as if they know you very well, trying to build your confidence and your self-esteem. At the end of the day, if somebody does that and you feel lonely, you get trapped. In the process of getting trapped, they started, asking like, okay, we could teach you this exercise, we could teach you to how to look good, and you could open your webcam in your messenger, you could open a webcam in your camera that you have in your laptop or on your phone, and you could take out your clothes, we can teach you how to do it, so when you build trust, you go all out, not realizing that the person on the other end is a trafficker. So that is the kind of cases that we are seeing. And that is where, we need to also understand that while we have technology for good, we also have technology which is challenging. And the fact that the world is changing very much. I mean, millennials are all up there with all the apps that is available, right? There are great apps and good apps, and there are like apps which is creating for mapping many kind of market understanding. But along with mapping market, they're mapping your ideologies, they're mapping your interests, your feelings, I mean, you can just see, I mean, like if you start liking one website or you start liking one purchase site, or you like some colors, you will always see ad that keeps coming to you that this something is available on your, on your neighborhood, this is available, or you have like some food, right? And every time we click on that, we get more and more. But that is artificial intelligence where you're promoting products. But trafficker and people are using those apps to understand your interests. So when you start mapping your words, your languages that you use, right? And then you start getting so engrossed in it because you feel that that person at the other end understand you, you could be vulnerable. Anybody could be vulnerable. So it depends on who you accept in your friend request, who are there with you as on the friend request, how much do you know where to draw the line, right? So that is where the challenging of how media is operating today. And I think more organizations themselves are unlearning, how to work with the situation. So I think we are evolving to work on that. We're evolving to collaborate extensively to understand how we need to look at the dark web. We need to look at how these tools are being used where young people are getting more vulnerable.
So what are a few ways you've developed to tackle this issue?
So some of the ways is that trying to create online tools to understand trends of trafficking, like what I'm sharing with you just now, are based on our learning lessons of how girls get trapped. Understanding how this can actually translate into getting, crime detection, understanding how vulnerability is happening, how understanding how people get duped, and understanding the new trends of human trafficking so that we are able to train law enforcement, we're able to look into the online cyber issue much more in depth, understanding that who's using, these spaces, so that will enable us to, like you just asked me the first question, how do you train people? You cannot create training tool without understanding the depth of the back end. And you cannot evolve that understanding the situation of crime and how it's happening. You cannot really reach out unless until you have the tools of understanding what other young people today do with all the apps, And so that then you come up with solutions. So the Impulse Case Management Center is working towards that, so that we are enabling all our state partners to be able to train and create awareness much more deeper, and working with the system in a much more, evolving manner. We've had great successes in the past, like we had, a manual created for a police training, school, which is the NEPA, Northeast Police Academy. We came up with different tools. We managed to train more than 30 to 40,000 enforcement, but we have to evolve with new tools. So if we don't evolve with new tools, then, we will not be able to tackle the problem. So that is where we are at this moment.
Okay. All right. And now, how many children and girls you've rescued over the years?
So the total numbers of cases that Impulse, pre the technology platform that we have and post now that we have, I would say intervene. I use the word intervene because it's collective in nature, You cannot actually say you have done it alone, because the 6 Rs operates, with a full circle of organization together from source, transit, and destination that brings together under one single platform. So we have dealt with more than 72,000 cases of human trafficking from across the Southeast Asia that we've worked through our state, country partner, networking partners, and every day it's rising.
And what are a few challenges? Like, I think online trafficking is one challenge that you're facing, but also how have these challenges changed for you over the past 30 years? Earlier, yeah.
So I think as an organization that started off to intervene directly, with the cases, like I just said, the 3, the 2 and plus 1, and then it went on and on and on and on, and there was no looking back, led us to transfer a knowledge through this innovation, which is the Impulse model, that others can apply so they don't reinvent the wheel. The fact that collective leaders with passion, can work towards, taking the innovation to the next level, and that is scaling deep. And we continue to scale deep over the years because the trends is changing. And then we scale out to actually multiply the leadership to come together to end human trafficking. And we scale up to also work at policy level to ensure that, we got the standard operating procedure in India and Myanmar. We're working on, ground rules on the SOP in India and Bangladesh, so all these policy, and also being very actively involved in the anti-trafficking bill, which is ongoing right now again, is also a way of ensuring that larger change can happen. If laws gets changed, gets, understood by people who works towards the issue, gets transferred in the most simplified manner, then only you can see real action of tackling crime. So that is, I would say, we have grown, we have learned and unlearned, we had fail and succeed. And today we transfer that innovation to others. So we have graduated our journey, and we felt that we should not intervene directly. Rather, we should get other organizations under the 6 Rs come together, transfer the learning lesson, get them under a single window platform to collaborate, ensuring that resources are shared, and also looking at people with support towards the issue of human trafficking, does not divide this process, but rather support these processes so that we see larger change. So that's where we are right now.
And although you must have had many challenging cases, but if you could walk me through one of the most challenging cases that you can recall.
I would say every case is very challenging, because even if you say that the trends are similar, but the depth of the crime is never similar. The fact that we've had some very successful cases in the past that has also led us to bring larger collaboration, in a larger way. I would just say that, I've had multiple kind of cases that we have dealt. And if I take one, I would be unjustified of how the cases we have been dealt. But Ella Sangma is a case that got us, great justice, access to justice in Tis Hazari Court in Delhi, where we manage with her strength and her, in fact, her courage, a life imprisonment of a trafficker. And she becomes the survival champion for us, the advocate of Impulse NGO Network today in many, many years. I think that was a case of a great learning and a turnaround for us, that the legal framework can only be achieved if survivors, advocates come to be courageous or build them to be more courageous so that they could give statement in the court. And unless until we have more, I would say, cases that are successful, then only we are sending a strong message out there, along with creating prevention. So creating prevention is a very important element as well, because every girl that we have rescued through the collective respond or intervene had one, common trend, that is economic reason. So unless until we strengthen that, we will never be able to end human trafficking. So that's where the journey of learning and unlearning.
Yeah. And ma'am, like after COVID, how have things changed, like with respect to trafficking and also the work model that you've been following?
So I think the work model of a hybrid where every woman work from home, in fact, has become more successful because of the fact that we have started that 13 years ago when people only realized work from home during COVID situation. So that is something that also came in, that none of the women artisans lost their employment, lost their market. Of course, we took a high risk to ensure that each one of them were having revenue coming to them, even during COVID situation. The people who was coming inbound back to the villages, realizing that they have lost their employment, are getting more interested in Impulse Empower. Our master artisans are the one who are reaching out to them through relief as a one step of emergency support, because Impulse Empower cannot adopt everybody at one go. We need to also strategize the way we have to work. That has led to the fact that prevention is an important element, creating employment opportunities within your own space or where you come from with food security is a way forward. The other factor is that with new trends that we saw during the past 7 years, as I mentioned, online, it grew drastically during COVID. While India saw migrants walking on the street, going back home, people losing their jobs and coming back, looking at how the service industry slashed down its businesses, we also saw that there's huge money transaction that happened online. And that India stood quite high during this course, that people were buying online exploitation, to the highest. So India has so much money and people who are buying online exploitation during the crisis, while one half of the people are returning back, not having employment or opportunity. So these are the two learning lessons, and that's the reason that 7 years learning made us more going deeper, that we need to look at the online issue much more seriously, because that's where the new trends and the new challenge of human trafficking is going to take.
So ma'am, are there any stats as to how have these trafficking cases increased during COVID?
If you're looking at one single stat, no, because I think different even the enforcement in terms of understanding how this has increases, how the cybercrime has increases, has not really have specific stat, because every crime that is booked is never booked under ITPA, Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act. So Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act is only the law that will say it's a trafficking case. But if you look at Supreme Court guidelines almost 10 years ago, that we managed to work collectively with other organizations, that says that even missing cases that have gone missing more than 45 days could be treated as human trafficking cases. So we are on that line, on that track right now, to actually look at the IT laws in the country, and that look at how IT law really work towards online safety, looking how the different online spaces, and also the fact that younger people today are so savvy with the online. So it's time to look at the new way. Today it's always at the click of a button for everything that we do, right? Yeah. It has its good, but it also has its bad.
Right.
So it's a click of a button that you connect to people. People are going on dating app like never before. People are booking a date like never before. But have you checked the credential of all of that? It's a big question mark. How do you know that the person who's online will not be exploiting you, right?
Right.
So that is another way of how the psychology is actually operating. The fact that everybody's become too self-conscious about themselves and their looks, are getting on so many apps and online, not knowing that they're being tracked, on their vulnerability and self-esteem.
Yeah.
So when would you be vulnerable, right? So the trend is going more in terms of challenge is more for us, because if you speak about this language to young people today, I don't think they'll agree. They'll say, well, we need to get ourselves on a dating site, we need to get a date, we need to connect ourselves, right? I'm not saying it's wrong. So like in the past, when we started to work on anti-trafficking, we were talking about recruiting happening with people in the villages,
Yeah.
creating awareness in the villages that if you are not clear who is offering you the job, check the credentials before
Right.
you
Yeah.
accept the job, right? And that's how you prevent people from being vulnerable. But today, it's in fact the vastness of the use of media
Yeah.
cannot be targeted very easily, right? The vastness of growing technology, it's out there. And how much do you change the mindset, right? So we have to work on new ways of changing mindset and new ways of making people understand that each one of us could be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And our mental health is an important issue to be discussed.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that being on social media is bad, but it also has to be understood very well how you're using it,
Right.
to what level you're using it. So I think that is where Impulse, the model, is taking one step further to
Yeah.
work towards that, like we did 31 years ago. Like 31 years ago, we were finding solution, which was different. It worked, it helped, it expanded. Today, we are finding new solution so that we could help and reach
Right.
out the larger masses. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that I had, ma'am. Thank you so much for interacting with me. And
Thank you
yeah,
very much.
thank you, ma'am.